The massive window of the Galactic Council Station offered a perfect view of Earth's first official starship, the Daredevil, as it smoothly glided into the docking position. The ship's sleek design stood out among the more practical-looking alien vessels, while the alien ships focused on function with their blocky shades and obvious shield generators. The humans had somehow made their ship both functional and like a silver arrow, ready to pierce the stars. Captain James Miller stood at the bridge of the Daredevil, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched the docking clamps engage. He couldn't help but smile at how far humanity had come, in just 50 years since discovering the ruins of an alien ship on Mars. That discovery had kicked humanity's space program into high gear, and now here they were about to join. The Galactic Community Engineering reports the new drive modifications are holding steady, Captain said. First Officer Beth White, her voice carrying the hint of worry. The modifications weren't exactly approved, but Miller had never been one to leave well enough alone, especially when he saw room for improvement. Excellent, Miller said, straightening his uniform. Let's go make history. The welcoming committee waiting. In the docking bay was an impressive sight. 12 representatives from the most powerful species in the galaxy stood in their formal robes. The tallest was nearly 8 feet high, with iridescent scales, while the shortest barely reached Miller's waist, but had eyes that seemed to contain entire nebula. A blue-skinned alien with 4 arms stepped forward. Welcome to the Galactic Council Station. I am High Counselor Wren. We have been looking forward to this meeting since we detected your species' first, faster-than-light test flight. Miller bowed slightly, remembering his diplomatic training. The honor is ours, High Counselor. I'm Captain James Miller of the Earthship Daredevil, and this is my first officer, Beth White. The formal introductions continued, each species offering their traditional greetings. Miller's crew managed not to stare too obviously at the floating crystalline being, or the one that seemed to be made entirely of shifting shadows. Everything was going perfectly, until they reached the tour of the engineering section. One of the council members, a being with metallic skin that clicked when they moved, was explaining their standard FTL drive design. This is the safest and most efficient design we have developed over 10,000 years of space travel, they said, their voice carrying the slight echo of metal on metal. Miller listened politely, but he couldn't help himself. He had spent the last month tweaking the Daredevil's drive, and he knew he had stumbled onto something revolutionary. The council member's explanation of safe and efficient seemed to translate to slow and outdated. In his mind, it's a very impressive system, Miller said, choosing his words carefully. But I think we might have found a way to improve it. The council members turned to him with various expressions of surprise, curiosity, and in some cases, what appeared to be alarm. Improve? High Counselor Wren asked. This design has been standardized across the galaxy for millennia, Captain Beth whispered, tugging at his sleeve. Remember the briefing about cultural sensitivities? Miller knew he should stop. He could see Beth's warning look, but the engineer in him couldn't let it go. The basic design is sound, but we found that by reconfiguring the quantum field generator and adding a secondary containment matrix, we can increase efficiency by at least 40%. The metallic council member made a sound like chimes in a storm that would be highly unstable. The energy requirements alone would. Watch this, Miller said, pulling out his tablet. I can show you the calculations. The effect was immediate and completely unexpected. Every alien in the room froze the crystalline beings. Light dimmed the shadow. Creature seemed to compress in on itself. High Counselor Wren, 4 arms all reached for different emergency devices. Emergency protocol, call 7. One of the council members shouted. Human verbal warning detected. Alarm klaxons began blaring throughout the station. The metallic council member was already backing away their surface, reflecting the flashing red warning lights. The human said it. They actually said it. Station initiate emergency containment procedures, said what Miller asked, completely confused. I just wanted to show you the drive modifications we made, Captain Beth hissed. I think we should. Before she could finish, energy fields sprang up around their group. The council members were quickly evacuating the engineering section, some moving with surprising speed for beings that had appeared so formal and stately just moments before. Please remain calm, an automated voice announced. A human-initiated emergency has been detected. All non-essential personnel, Please proceed to your designated safety zones. This is not a drill. Miller stood in the containment field, watching as the entire engineering section was sealed off. His tablet was still in his hand, the drive modification calculations glowing innocently on the screen. Beth, he said slowly, I think I might have made a diplomatic incident. You think? Beth replied, but there was a hint of amusement in her voice. Although I have to admit, I've never seen a group of diplomats moved that fast. It took 3 hours for the situation to be resolved. The council members insisted on reviewing Miller's modifications from a safe distance, using remote drooms to examine the data. To their evident surprise, the calculations checked out. The modifications were not only viable, but represented a genuine improvement to their standard design. This seemed to cause even more concern. You made these changes for fun? High Counselor Wren asked during the emergency review session, still maintaining a safe distance. Well, more out of professional curiosity. Miller explained the standard design was good, but I thought it could be better. Sometimes you have to try new things to make progress. And you tested these modifications on your way to this historic first meeting. Another council member asked, their crystalline formed flickering with what might have been anxiety. We ran simulations first, Miller said defensively, and everything worked perfectly. But what if it hadn't? Miller shrugged, then we would have learned what not to do. Next time this statement seemed to require another hour of discussion among the council members, in their native languages. Miller couldn't follow most of it, but he was pretty sure he heard the phrase, they're all like this, repeated several times. Finally, High Counselor Wren approached their containment field, though still maintaining what they apparently considered a safe distance. Captain Miller, they said formally, while your improvements appear to be both innovative and functional, we must establish some ground rules for future interaction. Primarily, we need to discuss the use of certain phrases that, in our experience, often precede significant disruptions to the natural order. Phrases? Miller asked. You mean, watch this? 3 council members flinched. Yes, Wren continued. Their voice trained that phrase in our research preparing for first contact. We noticed it appeared in your historical records, with alarming frequency, often just before events that drastically altered your scientific understanding, or caused significant property damage. Miller thought about this for a moment. He remembered his grandfather's stories about backyard rocket experiments that started with those exact words. And now that he thought about it, the phrase did seem to show up in a lot of human achievement videos and human disaster videos. I suppose we do say that a lot, he admitted. But it's just a way of sharing excitement about new ideas. Your species' definition of exciting is precisely what concerns us, Wren said. However, given the apparent success of your drive modifications, we are prepared to continue diplomatic relations. We will simply need to establish certain safety protocols. As Miller and Beth were finally released from the containment field, he couldn't help but notice that the council members were already drafting what appeared to be an extensive new set of regulations. He caught a glimpse of the title, Human Verbal Warning Signs and Emergency Response Procedures. Humanity's first day in the galactic community hadn't gone quite as planned, but they had certainly made an impression. And somehow Mill suspected this wouldn't be the last time humans would surprise their new alien neighbors with their unique approach to progress. At least they hadn't shown them the experimental shield modifications yet. Commander Lisa Reed stared at the document on her screen, reading it for the 3rd time, to make sure she wasn't hallucinating after the incident with Captain Miller's ship last month. The Galactic Council had been working overtime to create new safety protocols for dealing with humans. The final document had just been released, and it was both hilarious and deeply concerning. They actually made it a Class 1 emergency phrase, she muttered, shaking her head as she sat in her office at the newly established Earth Embassy on the Galactic Council station, right up there with detection of planet-killing asteroids and hostile fleet movements. The document, titled Human Warning Protocol, classified the phrase, watch this, as an immediate evacuation trigger. Any non-human personnel within hearing range were required to move to designated safe zones and initiate containment procedures. The protocol even included a helpful appendix of historical Earth broadcasts, demonstrating why this was necessary. A light chime announced the arrival of First Representative Toll, a tall being with silver skin that rippled like water when they moved. Commander Reed, do you have a moment to discuss the new protocols? Of course. Lisa said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. Though I have to say, this seems a bit extreme. Tolls settled into the specially designed seat. Their skin, catching the light, and mesmerizing patterns. We analyzed over 10,000 hours of your species' historical records. The phrase, "watch this," preceded 73% of your technological breakthroughs and 92% of your documented accidents. The statistics are quite clear, but that's just how humans express excitement about new ideas. Lisa tried to explain. It's not actually a warning sign. We have footage of a human saying those exact words before attempting to launch themselves over a canyon on a wheel device powered by rockets. Tolls said, their skin darkening with concern. Ah, you found those videos. Lisa winced. But you have to understand, that's how we learn and innovate. Sometimes you have to try crazy things to make progress. Like the incident last week in Laboratory Section 7, Toll asked pointedly. Lisa had been hoping they wouldn't bring that up. A human scientist had wondered if the standard alien food synthesizers could be modified to make better coffee. The resulting explosion had covered 3 decks, in a substance that was technically coffee, but had the consistency of cement. That was an unfortunate accident, she said diplomatically. The scientist said, watch this. Approximately 2.3 seconds before the incident. Point taken. Lisa sighed. But we can't just evacuate entire sections every time a human gets excited. About an idea we can and we will, Toll said firmly. The Council has also noticed an alarming trend of humans deliberately using the phrase to clear areas for unauthorized experiments. Lisa tried to keep her face neutral, but she knew exactly what Toll was talking about. Word had spread quickly through the human scientific community about the automatic evacuation protocol. Some of the more creative engineers had started using it as a way to get privacy for testing new ideas. I'll send out a memo about that, she promised. Just then, her computer chimed with an emergency alert. 3 sections of the station were initiating evacuation procedures simultaneously. Lisa pulled up the security feeds with a growing sense of dread. In Section 12, a human engineer was showing off a slightly modified gravity generator. Section 25 had a human chef who thought he could improve the efficiency of the station's waste recycling system to make better fertilizer for his hydroponic herbs. And in Section 31, someone was apparently trying to teach an alien eye to understand human jokes. 3 at once. Toll observed their skin, now a concerned shade of deep silver. This is exactly why we needed the protocol. Lisa, watch as aliens of all species calmly but quickly move to their designated safe zones. The evacuation was remarkably efficient, probably because they'd had so much practice lately. She had to admit, it was better than the chaos of the first few weeks after first contact. At least no one's panicking anymore, she offered. The Council is considering adding more phrases to the warning list, Toll continued. Hold my beer and I got an idea. Are currently under you. Lisa put her head in her hands. Please don't. The scientists will just start using those deliberately too. We've also noticed the humans seem to take our emergency responses as a challenge. Several of your engineers have started keeping score of how quickly they can trigger an evacuation. I'll talk to them, Lisa promised, making a mental note to find out who was winning that competition. For official reasons, of course. A new alert popped up on her screen, another evacuation, this time in the main council chamber itself. The security feed showed a human diplomat, gesturing excitedly at a holographic display of the station's power distribution system. Looks like Jack's trying to show them his new energy efficiency calculations, Lisa said, recognizing the diplomat. He's been working on that for weeks, the last time a human tried to improve our power systems. It took 3 days to restore normal gravity to the residential sections, Tolis reminded her. But it works better now, doesn't it? Tolis' skin rippled and what Lisa had learned was their equivalent of a reluctant nod. The efficiency did increase by 27%. However, the method of achieving that increase was unsettling. Another alert shined, 2 more sections going into evacuation mode. Perhaps we should continue this. Discussion in a safe zone, Toll suggested, already rising from their chair. It's fine, Lisa assured them. My office is designated as a contained area specifically for handling human-related incidents. She gestured to the reinforced walls and emergency containment field generators. Though, I still think that's overkill. Commander Reed, Toll said seriously. In the past month alone, Humans have attempted to improve our food synthesizers, gravity generators, power distribution, cution, waste management, AI systems, and shield harmonics. Each attempt was preceded by those words, and each resulted in at least some property damage, but also improvements. Lisa pointed out the shield modifications actually worked. After turning the entire defense fleet bright pink for 6 hours, that was just an unexpected side effect. And some of the ships looked quite nice in pink toll skin swirled with patterns that Lisa recognized as their version of exasperated amusement. The Council has noted that human innovations, while often effective, tend to take paths that no sane species would consider. The evacuation protocol is as much for our peace of mind as for actual safety. Lisa's computer chimed again. 5 more evacuations in progress. I should probably deal with this, she said, standing up. Would you like me to escort you to the nearest safe zone? That would be appreciated, Toll said, moving toward the door. The Council meets tomorrow to discuss adding visual warnings to accompany the verbal ones. We've noticed humans often make a particular facial expression just before saying those words as they walked through the corridors, passing groups of aliens calmly making their way to safe zones. Lisa couldn't help but smile. Humanity had been part of the galactic community for less than 2 months, and they'd already fundamentally changed how emergency protocols worked. She wondered what would happen when humans started sharing their other favorite phrases. What could possibly go wrong was bound to cause some interesting reactions. Through a nearby viewport, she could see the station, Central Hub, where Captain Miller's drive modifications were being carefully studied by alien engineers from a safe distance. Despite all the chaos, humanity's unique approach to innovation was already leaving its mark on the galaxy, even if that mark sometimes needed to be cleaned off the ceiling with industrial-strength solvents. Dr. Tom Walker wasn't supposed to be in the restricted archives of the Galactic Council Station. The fact that he had gained access using a series of clever hacks and one particularly well-timed watch, this evacuation was beside the point. What mattered was what he found in those archives, and right now, he was staring at proof of something he had suspected for months. The alien were deliberately holding back technological progress. His tablet quietly copied file after file, each one revealing a pattern that stretched back thousands of years. The Council didn't just regulate technology. They actively suppressed innovation to maintain what they called galactic stability. Brilliant ideas from member species were quietly filed away, marked as too destabilizing for implementation. Those sneaky little bureaucrats, he muttered, scrolling through more files. No wonder they panicked when Captain Miller showed them the drive modifications. A message popped up on his tablet. His friend Bill from engineering had just triggered another watch. This evacuation in Section 14, buying him an extra 15 minutes before the regular security sweep would reach the archives. The evacuation protocols that were meant to contain human chaos have become their greatest tool for exploration. Tom downloaded the last file, and Karai erased his tracks as he made his way. Back to his lab, he passed several aliens calmly walking to their safe zones, so used to human-triggered evacuations by now that they treated them like routine fire drills. Back in his lab, he called an emergency meeting of what had become known as the Innovation Underground, a loose group of human scientists and engineers who had noticed the Council's suspicious attitude toward progress. Within an hour, 20 of the brightest minds humanity had sent to the station were crowded into his containment-shielded lab. Look at this, he said, projecting the files onto the wall. They have plans for clean fusion that they developed 800 years ago. Artificial gravity, without generators, even biological immortality, all marked as too disruptive to implement. That explains why they keep insisting we stick to their standard designs, said Rita, a quantum physicist who had been trying to improve the station's shield harmonics. They're not just resistant to change, they're actively preventing it. But why? Asked Mark from the medical division. Some of these technologies could save lives. According to these records, Tom explained, they had some bad experiences with rapid technological advancement in their early history. 3 species wiped themselves out by developing technology faster than their cultures could handle it. So they decided to put the brakes on everything. Well, that's not happening anymore, Ra declared. Not now that we know about it. The group spent the next hour planning. They couldn't directly confront the Council. That would just lead to more restrictions. Instead, they needed to prove that innovation didn't have to be dangerous. Well, not too dangerous. Anyway, over the next few weeks, the human scientists launched what they privately called Operation. Watch this. They began making carefully calculated improvements to various systems throughout the station, using the evacuation protocols as cover for their work. Rita modified the shield harmonics to create a self-repairing system that was 40% more efficient. She did turn half the station's windows temporarily, translucent in the process, but the improvement was worth the brief embarrassment of everyone being able to see each other's quarters. Mark revolutionized the medical-based diagnostic systems by combining 3 different alien scanning technologies that the Council had deemed incompatible. The resulting device could detect illnesses before they showed symptoms, even if it did occasionally give its readings in the form of interpretive dance. Bill managed to improve the station's waste recycling efficiency by 200%. Though the less said about the testing phase, the better. The Council was still trying to figure out how he had temporarily turned all the station's water into a substance that tasted exactly like premium coffee, but contained no actual coffee molecules. The Council noticed, of course. How could they not? But every time they investigated, they found that the improvements were already integrated into crucial systems. Removing them would cause more disruption than leaving them in place. What really caught their attention, though, was how other species began to react. A group of younger aliens started hanging around the human sections, watching their work with increasing interest. Soon, there were quiet requests for collaboration, for explanations of human testing methods, for insights into what they called controlled chaos theory. "Did you see the new coffee machine in Section 8? Tom asked, during another underground meeting. "The one built by that young crystal engineer." "You mean the one that makes drinks that let you temporarily understand any language?" Rita grinned. "I heard it blew up 3 times before they got it working." "They're learning." The Council was not amused. They began installing more monitoring systems, increasing security patrols, and adding new phrases to the evacuation protocol. "I've got an idea. What if we, and theoretically speaking, all became emergency triggers?" The humans adapted. They started using coded phrases, hand signals, and in one memorable case, interpretive dance, to communicate their intent. The evacuation protocols became an elaborate game of cat and mouse, with humans finding new ways to trigger them and the Council constantly updating their regulations. Then came the day when Tom found something in the archives that changed everything. Hidden in the deepest restricted files was information about an ancient threat, something the Council had been watching with growing concern for centuries. "They're called the Harvesters," he told the group during an emergency meeting, "self-replicating machines that consume everything in their path to make more of themselves. The Council's been tracking them for generations, watching them slowly make their way through distant galaxies." "Let me guess," Rita said grimly. "The Council's solution is to do nothing and hope they don't come this way." "They have contingency plans," Tom said, "all of which involve sacrificing outer worlds to buy time for the core systems. They're so afraid of disrupting their stability that they'd rather lose whole planets than risk untested solutions." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity hadn't just stumbled into a galactic community that feared change. They had arrived just in time to witness the consequences of that fear. "Well," Mark said, finally standing up with a familiar glint in his eye, "I guess we better come up with something really good to show them." "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" Rita asked, already pulling out her tablet. "Operation Ultimate, watch this." Tom grinned. The others nodded, already beginning to plan. The Council had spent thousands of years maintaining stability, but now with an unstoppable threat approaching, and a species that treated impossible as a personal challenge, that stability was about to be thoroughly disrupted. As the group dispersed to begin their work, Tom couldn't help but smile. The Council had been writing about one thing. When humans said, "Watch this," it usually meant everything was about to change. They just hadn't realized that sometimes change was exactly what the galaxy needed. And if their solution happened to turn the station's artificial gravity inside out, or temporarily convert all matter into singing purple bubbles, well, that's just how progress worked. Sometimes the emergency alert sounded different this time. Instead of the usual evacuation tone that everyone had grown used to hearing whenever a human had an idea, this alarm had a deep resonating quality that made the station's walls vibrate in the main council chamber. The massive holographic display showed a sight that made even the most composed alien representatives break their careful diplomatic postures. The harvesters had arrived decades ahead of schedule. Engineer Mike Thompson stood at the back of the chamber, watching as the council members argued in their various languages. The translation system was struggling to keep up with their panic, creating a chaotic mix of overlapping voices, all saying essentially the same thing: "We're not ready." The display showed the harvester swarm moving through the outer systems, converting entire planets into more of themselves. Their traditional cube-shaped ships might have seemed almost boring, if not for the way they efficiently stripped whole worlds' barren days. The containment fleet reports a complete failure to slow their advance, announced High Counselor Wren, their forearms moving in patterns that reflected their distress. The standard defense protocols are having no effect. "Perhaps if we implement the evacuation plan for the outer systems," suggested one of the crystalline representatives, their structure flickering with anxiety. Mike had been studying the harvester data ever since Tom Walker had discovered it in the archives. He'd run hundreds of simulations, testing crazy idea after crazy idea. And now watching the council prepare to sacrifice billions of lives in a fighting retreat, he knew he couldn't stay quiet any longer. He stepped forward, his movement drawing attention in the panic-filled chamber. "I have an idea," he said, reaching for his tablet. Several council members immediately began moving toward their designated safe zones. "This is not the time for human experimentation," Wren said firmly. "We need to implement our established contingency plans." "Your established plans will get everyone killed," Mike replied. He pulled up his simulations, trying to project them onto the main display. "But if we combine your stable tech base with some human-style innovative chose," the human is going to say, it warned one of the shadow form representatives. Already halfway to the door, Mike took a deep breath. He knew what would happen. When he said the next words, but they needed to hear this. "Watch this," he declared. "I have a solution." The chamber erupted into action. Emergency containment fields sprang up, safe zones filled with retreating council members, and security drones moved to contain what they assumed would be another human-induced disaster. 3 representatives left so quickly that they forgot their ceremonial headpieces. But Mike had planned for this. He'd worked with Rita from the Shield Harmonics team to set up a special override. His tablet connected to the main systems before the evacuation protocols could fully engage. The harvesters work on predictable patterns, he explained to the now mostly empty chamber, his voice carrying through the emergency communication systems to the safe zones where the council members were hiding. They can counter any standard attack, because they've seen it all before, but they've never encountered human chaos theory. He pulled up his simulation, showing how the Harvester's cube ships moved in perfect mathematical formations. Look at their ship movements. Everything they do is based on precise calculations and perfect efficiency, which means they have absolutely no defense against complete irrationality. "Are you suggesting we fight them with nonsense?" asked a council member through the comm system. "Exactly," Mike grinned. "We use your stable technology as a base, but then we modify it in ways that make absolutely no sense. Hit them with weapons that don't follow the laws of physics, defense systems that work backwards, ships that aren't really there, except on Tuesdays." There was a long pause. "Those things are impossible." "Finally said impossible is humanity's specialty," Mike replied. "We've already proven we can make improvements. You thought we're impossible. Now we just need to do it on a bigger scale." He showed them the next simulation. "We can use the quantum field generators from the modified drive systems to create localized areas where reality doesn't work quite right. Combine that with your phase technology, and we can make weapons that exist in all possible states at once, until someone makes a joke about them." "This is madness," declared one of the crystalline representatives. "Exactly. That's why it will work. The harvesters can't adapt to something that doesn't make sense, because their whole system is based on logic and efficiency. We need to hit them with something so completely irrational that their adaptation protocols will crash." Trying to understand it, to demonstrate, he activated the small device he'd built. A section of the council chamber briefly turned inside out, without actually changing position, then filled with a substance that was simultaneously liquid, solid, and a small duck. "And that's just a prototype," he said, proud through the containment fields. He could see some of the younger alien representatives watching with interest. They had been working with humans long enough to start understanding that sometimes the craziest solutions were the best ones. The humans' plan is dangerous and completely untested, said High Counselor Wren from their safe zone. Yes, agreed Mike. But your tested and safe plans aren't working. The harvesters are coming, and they're not going to politely wait while we tried the same old strategies that failed to stop them before he showed them another simulation. This one demonstrating how the harvesters' perfect cube ships would react to encountering spaces where the normal rules of reality took a coffee break. Their adaptation protocols would try to compensate, fail to find a logical solution, try again, with different parameters, fail again, and eventually lock up completely. We can't beat them with logic, Mike explained, but we can absolutely defeat them with carefully weaponized nonsense. Humanity's greatest strength is that we don't always make sense, even to ourselves, and now that's exactly what the galaxy needs. A new alert sounded. The harvesters had just consumed another system, converting 3 planets and their moons into more cube ships. We're running out of time, Mike said. You can either stay in your safe zones and watch the galaxy be consumed by space Roombas with delusions of grandeur, or you can help me implement the craziest defense strategy in galactic history. There was a long moment of silence. Then slowly, one of the younger crystalline representatives emerged from their safe zone. I helped design the coffee machine that teaches languages. They said, I think I understand what the human is suggesting. We need to weaponize innovation itself. A shadow form representative joined them. The human chaos has improved our systems, even if the methods were disturbing. Perhaps disturbing is what we need now. One by one, more council members emerge, though many still kept a safe distance from Mike and his tablet. High Counselor Wren was the last to step forward. The council has maintained stability in this galaxy for thousands of years, they said solemnly. But perhaps, there are times when stability is not the answer. Mike grinned. Trust me, this is going to be the most unstable solution you've ever seen. Now who wants to help me turn the laws of physics into more of a set of physics suggestions? As the council members gathered around his simulations, Mike sent a quick message to the other human engineers. They had a lot of work to do, and they needed to do it fast. But for the first time since the harvesters appeared, there was hope. Sometimes the only way to save the galaxy was to temporarily break it, and if there was one thing humans were good at, it was breaking things in surprisingly useful ways. The battle for galactic survival began with what would later be recorded as the largest synchronized watch this event in human history. Across 50 star systems, human engineers and their newly converted alien colleagues triggered their modified devices simultaneously. The evacuation protocols went crazy, trying to clear every sector at once. Space itself seemed to hiccup in System 17. 3 planets temporarily swapped positions while playing a complex game of musical orbits. System 23 star started producing light that made anyone who saw it temporarily speak in rhyming couplets, and in System 35, matter briefly turned into various breakfast foods before returning to normal. Mike Thompson stood in the main control room of the Galactic Council Station, surrounded by screens showing the chaos unfolding across space. Beside him, High Counselor Wren was trying very hard not to look directly at any of the displays, their forehand clasped tightly behind their back. Phase 1 is working, Mike announced, watching as the harvester cubes encountered the first waves of weaponized nonsense. Their adaptation protocols are trying to compensate for the reality fluctuations. Rita's voice came through the comm system from her position in System 29. You should see this. The cubes are trying to maintain their perfect geometric shapes while passing through spaces where geometry doesn't work the same way. Some of them have corners that exist. Next Tuesday, a harvester ships began showing signs of confusion. Their usually perfect formations started to break down as they encountered regions of space where the laws of physics had been temporarily replaced with interpretive D-dance guidelines. Tom Walker reported in. From the front lines, the quantum field generators are working exactly wrong, which means they're working exactly right. The harvesters can't process spaces where cause comes after effect, and probability is measured in shades of purple. The main display showed a harvester cube trying to consume a small moon, only to find that the moon was simultaneously there, not there, and hosting a rather nice tea party. The Cub surface rippled as its programming tried to adapt, failed, tried again, and began to glitch. "Now for Phase 2, Mike said, activating the next set of modifications. "Everyone ready for the really weird stuff a spawned week?" Chorus of human voices responded with various versions of "Watch this." The evacuation protocols gave up entirely, and just displayed, "Humans are doing things in all sectors." The combined human-alien engineering teams had spent weeks preparing for this moment. They had taken every stable, reliable piece of galactic technology and modified it in ways that made the original designers cry. The result was a cascade of controlled chaos that spread across space like a wave of pure impossibility. Defensive shields started working in reverse, protecting ships by extending their vulnerable areas into dimensions where damage couldn't exist. Weapons fired backwards through time, hitting their targets the day before they were fired. Communication systems transmitted messages that could only be understood if you weren't actually trying to understand them. The harvester swarm's perfect coordination began to break down. Individual cubes started spinning in place, their surfaces shifting through impossible geometries as they tried to adapt to conditions that actively defied adaptation. Some of them attempted to consume nearby matter, only to find that matter had temporarily retired and left a strongly ed note about coming back later. "Their central control network is overloading," reported one of the crystalline engineers, who had helped design the chaos cascade. "They cannot maintain swarm coherence while experiencing 17 different versions of reality simultaneously." Mike nodded, checking the readings on his tablet. "Time for the final push. Dr. Walker, activate the probability inverters in 50 different star systems." Teams of humans and aliens, who had learned to embrace controlled chaos, activated devices that turned probability itself inside out. Suddenly, the least likely outcome became the most probable. The harvester's prediction algorithms, faced with calculating odds that actively argue with themselves, began to fail. "Look!" shouted Rita over the comm. "They're trying to retreat, but they can't figure out which direction." Makes sense anymore. The main display showed the harvester swarm breaking apart. Some cubes had developed polka dots, others had started reciting poetry in binary. A few had apparently decided to become interpretive dance critics and were writing strongly worded reviews about the aesthetic qualities of nearby asteroid fields. Then, in a cascade of physics-defying effects, the swarm's central control network finally crashed without their perfect coordination. The individual cubes couldn't maintain their complex replication protocols. They began to dissolve into clouds of confused nanomachines that couldn't remember if they were supposed to be cubes, hypercubes, or participants in an improvised comedy show. "We did it!" Mike exclaimed, turning to High Counselor Wren. "The power of weaponized nonsense prevails." Wren was staring at the displays with an expression that suggested they were seriously reconsidering every decision that had led to this moment. "You defeated an ancient threat that has consumed countless civilizations by breaking the universe." "Only temporarily," Mike assured them. "Most of the effects will wear off in a few days, though System 23 might keep rhyming for a week or two, and I'm not entirely sure when that one planet will stop." Being made of waffles, reports began coming in from across the affected systems. The harvester threat was completely neutralized. Reality was slowly settling back into its usual patterns, though with some interesting new quirks. Several alien species were already studying the after effects, talking excitedly about the scientific possibilities of controlled chaos theory. In the days that followed, the Galactic Council held an emergency session to discuss the implications of what had happened. The chamber was packed, though some representatives still instinctively moved toward the safe zones whenever a human stood up to speak. "We must acknowledge," Kolge High Counselor Wren announced, "that our policy of absolute stability nearly led to our destruction. The human approach to innovation, while terrifying, has proven its worth." The Council voted to create a new department, the Bureau of Controlled Chaos and Innovation. It would be tasked with finding a balance between stable progress and revolutionary changes. Humans would work alongside aliens who had learned to appreciate the value of occasional nonsense. They also voted to maintain the Watch This evacuation protocols, but with a modification. Now when humans said those words, others could choose to either move to a safe zone or stay and witness whatever impossible thing was about to happen. As Mike left the council chamber, he found a group of young alien engineers waiting for him. They had questions about chaos theory, impossible modifications, and the proper application of randomness in technological development. The first rule of human innovation, he told them with a grin, is that sometimes the best solution is the one that sounds completely ridiculous at first. The second rule is to always have a containment field ready, just in case the station's AI interrupted, with an announcement. Attention, all personnel. Humans are attempting to improve the station's coffee machines. Again, please note that safe zones are available, but not mandatory. Current probability of physics violations. 73% chance of temporary transformation. Into breakfast foods 12%. Possibility of gaining the ability to taste colors unknown, but likely. Mike smiled as he watched both humans and aliens hurrying toward the engineering section, eager to see what impossible thing would happen next. The galaxy had changed. The age of perfect stability was over, replaced by an era where progress meant being willing to try things that probably shouldn't work, but somehow did anyway. And somewhere in the depths of space, a single harvester cube that had survived the chaos cascade was trying to decide if it wanted to be a cube anymore. It had developed a strange appreciation for comedy and was considering a career change. After all, in a galaxy where humans could weaponize nonsense itself, anything was possible. The universe would never be the same. But then again, that was kind of the point.